everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever. And today I'm bringing you sort of a special video today, kind of special album review, or album review should I say, because today in my video I'm going to be talking about some of the albums that were released in this first half of 2017 that I didn't get a chance to review in full on my channel here. Now, why exactly I didn't review these albums on my channel could be for a variety of reasons. It could just be because it slipped under my radar or something like that and I didn't hear about it until much later. It could be because I didn't plan on reviewing the album. I only heard things about the album after it was released, like positive reviews from other critics that I follow here on YouTube, and then I decided to check out the album later on. Or it could just be because it was a busy week. I had other albums I wanted to review instead, and I just didn't have enough time to get to one of the ones here. There's a variety of reasons why, and some of the albums here are very good. Some of them aren't so good, but you know, it's an interesting mix, I guess you could say. If the album isn't here in this video, that could mean that I did a full album review of it, so I would recommend you check my album review playlist for all the albums I've reviewed so far. So I've only been reviewing albums on YouTube in 2017, so all that's going to be in that playlist are 2017 albums as well as some of the discography reviews that I've done this year. And throughout this video, I'm just going to share my quick thoughts on these albums. I'm not going to go into full album reviews for each and every one of them because this video would just run a bit too long, like way too long. And, you know, I don't want to be here with like a 3-hour video because, you know, that's not really the point. I just want to give my quick thoughts on these albums, and hopefully there should be enough of them that this is going to be a very long video as it is. So, you know, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, so don't expect like a full review or anything like that. It's just here to show my quick thoughts on these albums. Obviously, if there's a lot of things I want to say about it, I'll speak about it a bit more. But some of these, there's not a lot to talk about, really. I'm also going to show up my score for the albums in the corner here. You know, I've left those down in the comment, not the comments, but the description of every review that I've done, and instead of doing it down in the description below for all these albums, I'm just going to have it here on the screen, so you can see just kind of my overall rating of the album, as well as my favorite song from the album I'm going to put up here also. So, I think that's enough rambling for now. Let's get right into this review. Just a quick note before we start this, all these albums, I'm not going to go into full reviews for each and every one of them. This video would just be way too long if I did that. I'm just going to share my quick thoughts on the album. Some of them I might go into a bit more detail than others, but I'm going to keep it to a minimum for the most part, like less than a few minutes for most of these, as well as just throw up my score of the album on the screen along with my favorite song from the album while I'm talking, because I also want to share that. Also, these reviews, or these segments of these reviews, are not recorded all at the same time because I usually record these after I listen to the album. So, of course, some of these go back a few months because I've been doing this pretty much most of 2017 so far. So, of course, I'm going to be wearing different clothes and stuff. And no, I didn't just change my clothes a ton of times for this review. It's just because they were recorded at different times. But yeah, without much other delay, let's get right into these reviews. Alright, now we're talking about David Bowie's No Plan EP. This is a collection of leftover tracks from his previous album Black Star, as well as the track Lazarus, which appeared on Black Star itself. Now, the reason why I didn't review this EP when it came out, it's not because I didn't care enough to review it, or it's not because I hadn't heard of the artist until after it was released. It's just because it honestly slipped under my radar. I didn't even know that this EP existed until a couple of months ago. And, you know, I find that rather embarrassing considering Black Star was one of my favorite albums of last year. If you watch my top 10 albums of 2016, it placed very highly on that list. So it's not that I'm not a fan of Black Star or David Bowie or anything like that. I love Black Star and David Bowie. So it's really embarrassing that this slipped under my radar. But talking about the EP itself, Lazarus, the track from Black Star, just the same as it was there, just as good as it was there, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. But the 3 new tracks, I think, are very good. They follow a very similar sound and format to those on Black Star. Of course, they were leftover tracks, so they would make sense being on the album. They had that same jazz rock sort of sound to them, that somewhat experimental sound that David Bowie hadn't really done before. And they have similar lyrical themes concerning death and David Bowie approaching his final, you know, album. Overall, it's a very good EP. If you like Black Star, you definitely need to check this out because these 3 new tracks are pretty much getting much of the same that you got on Black Star. So if you like Black Star, there's no reason why you wouldn't like this. And if you're a David Bowie fan who hasn't checked out Black Star, you need to check out Black Star. And then check out this EP. It's must listen to. Code Orange brought us a really interesting metalcore record this year that I really regret not reviewing on the channel. I just love the aggression that's presented here on this album, but I also really like how the band is able to do a lot of things outside of, you know, your typical metalcore isms, I guess you could say. They have industrial influences that pop up occasionally. They have alternative metal influences, like on the track of Bleeding in the Blur, which it's just cool. I like the multiple vocalists of the band. It brings out, it makes the band stand out from some of the other bands that, they could be compared to. And overall, I really like the aggression this band has. It's a great record. Iron Reagan's crossover ministry. Now, earlier this year, I found myself really getting into crossover thrash, and really before this year, the only band I knew in the genre was really Suicidal Tendencies. However, I began exploring other bands like DRI, Municipal Waste, Toxic Holocaust, all those other groups, and eventually I stumbled upon this album a few months after it came out, I believe it was, and when I found out that the vocalist for this group and stuff was from Municipal Waste, I was like, oh, I definitely gotta check this out, and I kind of regret not reviewing it for that reason, but overall, this is a good record. It's kind of, not generic, I guess you could say, but a bit redundant, and it doesn't really do anything new for the genre, but what it does do with, kind of playing this older sound of music, it's very good with what it does. I like the lyrics on the album, how they're kind of commentary-like, yet at the same time somewhat humorous. Overall, it's a good record. Not one of my favorites from the year, but still good. Alright, now we're talking about the new Lupe Fiasco album that came out earlier this year, DROGAS Light. Now, I initially intended to review this album in full. Unfortunately, I couldn't because I was sick around the time that it came out. So I'm just going to talk about it here. And honestly, I really don't think I have too much to say about this album. It consists of just not exactly, I guess you could say, leftover tracks. Just tracks that he didn't feel were good enough to be on the DROGAS album that's going to come out later on this year, I believe. And so these are more like poppy, lighthearted sort of songs. Not super deep lyrical Lupe tracks that you would kind of expect from him. And as a result, I don't think the project is exactly, that good. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world ever. I'm just kind of middle of the road on it, honestly. Even for the tracks being poppier, they're not like super radio friendly in that regard. They're kind of like some of the popular tracks that he's done before in the past. There's nothing really super deep or lyrical on here, at least by his own standards. And that's why a lot of people, myself included, kind of like Lupe's music is the lyrics. So when he's not exactly performing at top, I guess you could say his top capability in terms of the lyrics, I'm not exactly super interested all that much. And even for these poppier sort of tracks, I'm just not super interested in all of them. Honestly, it's been a while since I've heard the album. When I'm recording this now, I went back to it a few times, and I'm still having a difficult time trying to remember some of the tracks on there, and just some of the beats, really everything. It's not a terrible album, but it leaves a lot to be desired, honestly, and that's kind of to be expected given that it is, tracks that weren't intended to be on the main DROGAS album that's coming out later on, though I am still somewhat interested to see what he's going to do on that album. Now we're talking about the new Pallbearer album, Heartless. I'm new to this group also. I heard good things about this album, so I decided to check it out after it was released. I'm not doing a full review of it because it's also another great album here that I heard this year. I really like the whole, grandness of this album, I guess you could say. I love how it has this sort of big feel to it. For doom metal, it's just a really dreary album, not a super aggressive doom album, I guess you could say. More of a sad type of doomy sound, if you know what I mean. I just really love how, large it feels. I love the vocals here on this album. Definitely a very beautiful sounding album at times even. And in metal in 2017, it's not something you could say for lots of albums, but this album it definitely applies to. I'm really liking this project. Alright folks, up next we're talking about the new Joey Badass album, Amerikkkan Badass. Now, Joey Badass was a rapper that I heard a lot about. I heard good things about him, but I only decided to check him out with the release of this album. And I really kind of regret not giving this album a full review when it came out. But between the fact that my camera broke back then, I had lots of other reviews to do at that time. I was just, I couldn't get it done then. I had to save it for this, which is unfortunate because this is definitely one of my favorite rap albums of the year so far. I really like the stuff that he's able to do here on this project. Now, in 2017, of course, there's lots of political hip-hop albums that have been coming out, just lots of political albums in general that have been coming out. But I see lots of, reoccurring problems with some of these albums. Either the message that they're delivering is, too redundant, it's been done before, and it's just being, regurgitated in the same way again, or at times, the messages are not very focused, and it just creates for a messy project overall, or at times it can come off, condescending with the message that they're trying to deliver. But on this project, Joey's able to with his politics and the stuff that he's trying to say concerning politics in America in 2017. I think he does it very well. He doesn't sound condescending. It doesn't sound, regurgitated. I mean, these are important issues he's talking about that you've heard before on other hip-hop albums, but he presents it in a way that's very relatable, but it's a way that makes you believe that it's very important, the stuff that he's talking about. And I really like that about that. I especially like when he gets angry on this project, on tracks like Rockabye Baby with Schoolboy Q. That's definitely one of my favorites on the album. He's just, I really love how angry he feels on that track, and it's one of the few, very angry tracks that come out of this whole political mess that's been 2017 that I think has really worked very well. And other tracks, I really like Temptation. I like his singing on that track, which, you don't really hear a lot about rappers, but I do like it there. And I do like how he's able to pull off, older sounding beats on some of these tracks, but then have a newer sound on tracks such as Devastated, which sounds more like a pop rap track, but he pulls it off very well in my opinion. I think it's really good. So overall, this album, I have to highly recommend it to you. We could very well see this at my year-end list. I'm just going to say that. And I just overall really like a lot of the creativity that he shows on this project, especially on tracks like the Miss America, Why Don't You Love Me track. I forgot exactly what it was called, but it's kind of framed like a love song, but he's not talking to another person, he's talking to the country of America itself. I thought that was really cool. And then, of course, on the final track on the album, where he's kind of this spoken word, rap outro. I mean, he's kind of rhyming, but he's also kind of speaking it at the same time. It's an album that does the spoken word, concept very well on this last track. It's not overdone like on some other albums we heard this year, but I think it's overall really good. This is just a great album. Alright, now we're talking about this new Vinyl Theater album, Origami. Now, I was unfamiliar with this group before hearing this album. I heard some buzz about it, so I decided to check it out, and I enjoyed this project. I think this band manages to mix rock elements with electronics better than some other bands, some other veteran bands have been able to do this year. And overall, I would have to say this album is just enjoyable all the way through. I don't think it's one of the year's best albums, but it is a good album, don't get me wrong. The sound of this band, aside from having the rock elements and the electronic elements, if I had to be a bit more specific with that, I would say they're kind of a mix of a kind of pop rock band, maybe even a pop punk leaning band at times. Of course, mixing some of those electronic elements in there. That's not to say that they're a perfect 50-50 split of electronics and rock music. They're definitely a rock band through and through. They just managed to mix those electronic, more pop-leaning elements in there a bit better, and they create overall a very catchy product, and a product that I think is a project that should be checked out this year, especially if you're a fan of alternative rock, pop, pop punk even. This is an album that you should be checking out. Alright, now we're talking about the new Seether album, Poison the Parish. And as far as my history goes with Seether, the song Remedy by them is one of my earliest rock songs that I really got into, one of the earliest kind of real heavy track. I mean, I know it's not super heavy, but for me at the time it was. And I'm not a super big fan of Seether as a whole. I do enjoy all their stuff, but it's just not a band I seek after a ton. And my opinion on this album isn't quite much different than their other ones. It's a good album, especially for the genre that's in, kind of that post-grunge sort of alternative metal styling. And I always thought that Seether were one of the better bands of that genre. Their lyrics are always a bit better. And here they managed to bring some catchy choruses and hooks, some good guitar stuff here. Definitely a heavier album than some of the other outputs we saw from similar bands this year. And overall, it's just pretty enjoyable. It's not, once again, it's not something I would seek after a ton, but there's some tracks on this album that I am rather enjoying. So, if you're a Seether fan, you're probably going to like this. If you're not a Seether fan, you're still probably not going to like this. Pretty simple. Alright, now we're talking about the new Snoop Dogg album, Neva Left. Now when it comes to Snoop Dogg, I'm a fan of his classic material back from the 90s. But when it comes to his newer material, really everything that was kind of after the 90s up to the present, I really haven't been following Snoop Dogg. I'm not really a fan of some of the material that he's put out. It's just kind of, lackluster to me in my opinion. And, Snoop Dogg has managed to maintain his popularity, not just as, a rapper, but as a pop culture icon. Everyone knows who Snoop Dogg is. So, despite the fact that I don't really follow his music, or I haven't been following his more recent outputs in terms of music, I still do hear about the guys. And when I heard about this new album that he was coming out with, Neva Left, just given the album artwork, the title, and stuff like that, I kind of figured it might be like a throwback to some of his earlier works, and I kind of find out that it was going to try to be that. So I was actually interested in hearing this project because, as I said before, I'm really interested in his older material. So I decided to check this out, of course, to see, was it gonna, possibly be more like his older material as opposed to some of the newer stuff that he's done. And to a degree, it is. There are some throwback tracks on here that go for that, classic sort of G-funk sound, and I do think that they managed to work. Of course, Snoop Dogg's talking about how he kind of, never left that, I guess, point in his life. He still kind of is the same person from that, despite some of the musical changes that he's gone through since then, just kind of his rise in popularity. But there are some tracks on here that I don't think work quite as well. Despite the fact that he's going through for a throwback sound here, there's some tracks that kind of abandon that idea. Take the track Trash Bags, for example, which was easily my least favorite track on the album. It goes for a more modern, mainstream hip-hop type of approach in terms of the beat and just everything that's going on in the track. And I'm not personally a fan of that style of hip-hop, that sort of popular hip-hop that's in the mainstream nowadays. So as a result, I wasn't really digging that track, though I do feel like a more modern audience might actually enjoy that track, which is probably why he included it here on the project. But even some of the more throwback tracks I feel like just aren't as super interesting as they could have been, but there are some good ones that are still on here that I think I may be coming back to in the future. So Snoop Dogg manages to deliver some of these good throwback tracks here, but then there are some other tracks that don't really miss. It creates an average album overall, I would say. I am kind of happy I checked it out, but it still could have been better. Alright, now we're talking about Danzig's new album, Black Laden Crown, and as far as being a Danzig fan goes, I'm mostly familiar with his albums with the Misfits, of course, and his earlier solo careers, kind of the classic albums from him. I haven't heard too many of his more recent solo outputs, but I decided to check this one out, and I think it's a decent effort. There are some glaring problems, however. One of the biggest ones being just Danzig's vocals. They're not quite what they used to be, and another problem that kind of makes this first problem worse is the production here on this album, and that really is that the vocals are so in the front of the mix that they're so much louder than everything else, and it kind of makes the fact that his vocals aren't quite as nice as they used to be very obvious, and it just sounds kind of jarring when you're listening to the album all the way through. But despite that complaint, much of the rest of the album is enjoyable. There's nice riffs here. At times it leans more towards hard rock, other times traditional heavy metal. There's some doom metal influence in there. Overall, I think it's pretty good. The instrumentals sound nice, if not a bit generic at times. But overall, I'd recommend it if you're a Danzig fan. If you're just kind of a traditional heavy metal fan, you might get some enjoyment out of it. But it's not something that I would, pay money for in an excessive amount or, really seek after. It's decent. Alright, now I'm going to be talking about the new Big Boy album, Boomiverse, and this is Big Boy's third solo album. Honestly, when it comes to Big Boy's solo albums that he's done ever since, his time after Outkast, I haven't exactly caught up with them. I believe I heard his first album a while back, but I don't remember it all too well, and I haven't listened to his second album really in full, but I am very familiar with Outkast. Of course, I love Outkast, one of the best hip-hop groups ever, really. And of course, this album here, I decided to check it out, and overall, I think I really ended up enjoying this Big Boy project a lot more than I expected to. On my first listen, I wasn't really feeling this project, but with more listens, it grew on me a bit more. Now, this project sees Big Boy exploring a lot of different sounds and a lot of different, just styles here. There's some tracks that are more of a hardcore sort of style, and there's some tracks that have more of a pop appeal to them on the other hand also. Some of the beats are more electronic leaning, some of them have a bit more of an older sound that, you feel like Big Boy would feel a bit more comfortable over compared to some of these electronic beats, but he does manage to do a good job over some of the more, out there type of beats that he decides to pick for this album. And despite the fact that this album has a lot of different sounds on it, it doesn't really feel disjointed or all over the place, I guess you can say. And despite the fact that he attempts many different sounds, he manages to pull most of them off pretty well in my opinion. One thing Big Boy proves throughout this project is that he could definitely still rap. I mean, every part that he comes on just rapping on this project are some of the highlights here. He's just, overall one of the best MCs ever, to be honest, in my opinion. And some of the guest features that he gets on this project are good also. One of my favorites, Killer Mike, appears 3 times on this project. I know Big Boy and Killer Mike are good friends, or so that kind of makes sense that he would appear on this project multiple times, and every time he does, he's great, of course. And then there was also some guest features that kind of surprised me, like Adam Levine of Maroon 5. Now, when it comes to Maroon 5, I liked some of their older material, but I feel like as the band has gone on, they've just become more synthetic and poppy, and Adam Levine's voice in particular just has become more annoying to me with time due to the amount of auto-tune and just effects they put on it. But here, his voice sounds a lot more like it did on some of those older Maroon 5 records. It's a bit more natural sounding, I guess you could say. And, I kind of ended up liking it. I'm not going to say it was the best thing ever, but I was just happy that I didn't end up hating it, the track that he appeared on, which is definitely one of the popular tracks that you get here in the track listing. Still, his lyrics here, I'm not sure if he's the one who wrote them, but they're just a bit generic still, but, at least he sounds alright. And just throughout this project, there are some other songs that are a bit popular sounding, like All Night, I believe was the name of the track. That one also had a very kind of poppy, happy, upbeat feel to it. Yet there are some tracks like Kill Jill, which features Killer Mike and Jeezy, as I mentioned earlier. That one was one of the harder hitting tracks, one of the singles released from this project, and it's one of the ones I like a lot more here, just because all three of them kind of go in on this track and it sounds pretty great. Even the weird beat that I wasn't exactly on board with initially has kind of grown on me with time. Overall, if I just had a few complaints with this project, is that at times, while for the most part it manages to incorporate all these sounds very well, there's occasionally a track that seems a bit out of place or a bit too poppy, or just a bit too out of place for this project still. And that's a minor complaint, honestly. This is a pretty decent project for the most part. It's a good hip-hop album that I recommend you check out if you're a Big Boy fan, if you're just a fan of Southern hip-hop, just hip-hop in general. There's definitely something for you here on this album, because like I said earlier, it goes into a lot of different styles throughout the project, so you're probably going to find something that you're interested in here. Overall, I'd recommend it. Alright guys, I think that sums up all the reviews I wanted to talk about here today. Just kind of a quick reminder that just because I didn't talk about the album here doesn't necessarily mean I didn't review it. I may have done a full album review for it, and just because I didn't review it here doesn't necessarily mean that I may not review it in the second one of these kind of catch-up reviews I'm going to be doing at the second half of 2017, or just the end of the year really. Expect that to come out sometime in late December before my year-end lists come out, and that is pretty much I'm expecting for that video, just to talk about albums for the second half of 2017 that I didn't get to talk about for whatever reason, as well as any other ones from the first half of 17 that I just get around to listening to then. And believe me, there will be some, because there's already some albums that came out in the first half of this year that I wanted to listen to that I just didn't have enough time already to get around to. Hopefully for the second half of the year, in that video, I'll be able to talk about them then. Hopefully that's not too long of a wait for you guys, but honestly, lots of these reviews I decided not to do just come from albums that either I don't have too much of an interest in checking out, or just because I didn't hear about them until a bit later on, honestly. You can kind of see that going through this video. Some of the ones I give higher scores to were albums that I didn't really discover until after they were released, or things I just heard positively about after they were released. And kind of the ones I gave average scores to were kind of ones that I really didn't care to check in too much detail when they were released. I think that's just, sums everything up here pretty well. So, this is 2017. The first half of 2017 is not done completely. Of course, we still have that second catch-up review, as well as the year-end list, which are going to be tons of fun. There's not going to be like a half-year midpoint kind of top 10 list or anything like that. I'm just waiting till the end of the year. If you were curious, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more album reviews and other music-related content. Leave a like on the video. Comment down below what were your thoughts on some of the albums that I reviewed here today. Thank you for watching, and stay golden.